Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I have the opportunity today to work on a classic Penn International 965. One of my customers who's had the reel since it was new brought it into me the other day and asked me just to do some basic service that hasn't had it oiled or lubed in a while, and I wanted to get ready for the upcoming season, so he asked me to go ahead and take it apart and do what we need to do on this one to make it ready for another season. He was kind of fascinated when I told him that this reel is becoming quite the collectible reel, and it's probably sold for 5 times what he paid for it. But a recent search on an auction site was showing this reel at almost $200. So he was quite surprised by that. But he said he'll continue to use it, and we're gonna go make it ready for the next season. So what I like to do on a reel like this is start by getting to the gear side. In order to do that, I have to remove the handle assembly and star drag. So we'll go ahead and do that. There's a small screw on the cap nut that holds the handle in place. Pull that out, watch that little nut, that little screw in there, that you don't lose that. And speaking of losing parts, I always use a parts tray to make sure that I know where to find them when I go to reassemble the reel. With that out of the way, we have a nut, I believe it's a 7/16 nut, which it is. We're going to go back that off, that backs off counterclockwise, and then I can remove the handle. So I've been doing reels at Second Chance Tackle now for over 20 years. I'm sharing my experiences with you. I appreciate comments and suggestions. If you see things that I'm doing that could be improved, I'm always open for tips. And if there's something that you'd like to see done, if I have the reel or if I have access to the reel, I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so you noticed I backed off the star drag. There's 2 washers here. I always like to make sure I know what I'm doing here. These washers are concave washers. They can be set to increase and decrease drag. By concave, I mean there's a bend to them. These are set bend to bend. These could be set side to side or opposing, depending on what kind of drag type spacing you need. In this case, these are straight to straight, so I leave it that way. And then you have, and I put them into the bucket. Good time for a helpful tip. If you don't know what you're doing with this reel, then take pictures. So now would be a good time to take your cell phone out or your camera. Take a picture so that you know that those 2 washers go face to face and they go on top of this assembly prior to putting that drag star in. Okay, we remove the gear side plate by taking out the 2 thumb screws there. These you can just back off 1 or 2 turns, and then you can actually move them by hand because they have the grip. Speaking of hands, you'll notice that I wear a latex glove on my non-operational hand, if you will. I am a right-handed person. I like to keep that on there because you never know what's going to happen when you open up these reels in terms of grease. And one of the good ways that you can avoid, getting a bunch of grease on your hands is by wearing that latex glove. Okay, they're backed out. This assembly should simply pull off. It does. And that gives us access to the first portion that we're going to lube here. And we're going to lube the back side of this. There's several bearings in here. There's a bearing on the spool. There's a bearing on the back side. I believe there's a bearing on the inside of this as well. So here's where we are on the spool assembly. Hopefully we can see that. We have an internal bearing here. We also have the plastic drive gear that operates the level wind function. So on the plastic drive gear, there's actually 2 gears there. There's the gear that the spool drives, which is the teething mechanism here that hits the big drive. And then there's a smaller one that drives the cross wind, level wind function. The first thing I like to do when I'm doing a reel that I don't know about is I like to turn that plastic gear, and I'm using that screwdriver for this. Hopefully you can see this. And I want to make sure all the teeth are on there because that's the primary cause for failure in the level wind reels is that plastic gear breaks. They do that. There's a reason for it. It's not being cheap. You want the flexibility of these level wind gears, and plastic gives you a little bit of play in there to mesh properly. Okay, both of these are working properly, so I'm going to take a little bit of blue grease. I use a Penn reel grease for that. How appropriate, I'm working on a Penn reel. Works on all reels. Just put a little bit on there just to lubricate it for future use. And you don't have to get it on every teeth. As it works its way through on the wind process, it'll work its way out. And then for bearings, I use an oil. In this case, I use Reelex, which is specifically designed for fishing reels. And that bearing on the back plate there gets a drop of oil. Okay, so don't go crazy over lubing it. It'll only press out. But once we did that, I checked the teeth on the back of the spool, making sure that all of the teeth in there are fine. They are. And then I reseat the spool. And sometimes it's not easy to get it without having in this case, the braid follow you through and kind of jam. But if you have a little screwdriver or something, in this case, this one's coming over both sides. So if this was my reel and I was getting ready for the new season, I would take the braided line off and I would refresh that, but not my reel, and I will recommend to the customer to go replace that braid. Okay, now we have a bearing on this side of the spool, so I'm going to put a drop of oil on that as well. And again, don't go crazy, don't over lube. That's a reason for failure on a lot of reels, but that's enough. And then we're going to put a drop of oil on the crosswind borum. And I'm going to cheat here. We'll put some oil over the top to get to the pawl, but you could remove the pawl assembly and do that as well. Okay, so now to get to the gear side, there's two screws that hold the backside assembly in place. We're going to remove those. And these are small screws, so I use my small screwdriver. There's a video I put together the other day on all of the tools that I have in my workshop as I get ready to fix reels so that they're near at hand. If you're just doing this and you haven't done one of these, go take a look at that video. You'll find everything that you'll need pre-set up so that when you find yourself holding a reel like this and realize that you need a pliers or something else, you don't have to put that down and kind of forget where you left off. All right, so there's two screws here. You'll notice I'm cupping this assembly in my hand. That's because when these screws come out, it will release that plate. And I want to make sure that nothing springs or goes crazy there. Okay, so the plate is off. I simply pull that off. This has got a lot of lube, so maybe it has too much lube, quite honestly. I'm going to go clean some of that off. There's a lot of wasted lube in here, and sometimes that lube can actually attract contaminants. So you really don't want a lot in there where it's not of any value. So I'm going to grab some cleaning equipment here. The two things I use most is a paper towel and cotton swabs. The cotton swabs are for that inside part of the reel there, but here, I'm just going to go ahead and just wipe that down with the paper towel. Get that surplus grease out of there. And if you really want to get clean about it, use a degreaser. In this case, I'm going to use a WD-40. Because it's on the gear side, it's an oil-based product, I would rather do that. I have a general degreaser that I really like for cleaning, but I use it on the outside of the reels. It's Purple Power. You can find this online. You can find it in Walmart and other places. That's great for taking fish scales and things off. Okay, while I have this side here, I do have an anti-reverse gear here. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue grease on that just to let that work itself in again. All right, so this is in better condition now. And I'm going to turn my attention to the other side here. So we're going to just take that cotton swab. We're going to pull off some of that surplus grease that's just hanging in there. Again, that serves no purpose other than collect contaminants, and it's really not what we want to do. If this, there's openings in the back of this gear side here. If salt water gets in there or something, this grease is just going to act as a bonding agent and hold it there and corrode everything. Okay, so last thing we want to look at then, this is properly lubed now. I'm going to take the drags off. I'm going to make sure that we have those properly lubricated as well. There's a ferrule first. You'll notice the ferrule is not a full circle. It does ride on that main gear, and it's an oblong into my parts basket. That goes, and I'm going to just pull these up. And some of the earlier reels have a back plate on these that function for the anti-reverse. In this case, not needed. That's a good thing we just did this now, because these got the HT100 drags in there, but they haven't been lubed. So let's go ahead and do that. So I just laid that stack down there. I know how these go, but for your purposes, it goes the drag, thin drag. You'll notice it's got a greater diameter to it that sits over the other piece. Then it goes, let's get these in order since I took them out of order. Okay, the drag that goes over the main spool sits in the shaft. Metal drag, fiber, ear drag is always in the middle, fiber, top drag. Okay, and then the best thing to use for the drags is a drag grease. It's made by Cowles. It's a wonderful product I've never had any issues with, and I would recommend it. You know, every manufacturer seems to make it. I know Daiwa makes a drag grease and others, and each one of them is going to be pretty good. I happen to like the Cowles. It's an aftermarket product. I'm noticing that there's a little bit of corrosion there, so I'm just going to try and scrape that with my screwdriver to free that up. You want all surfaces to operate smoothly. There you go. All right, well, whatever got in there got gone now, so we're good. We're good there. All right. Hopefully, you know, dirt and contamination seem to be a killer in these reels, so try and keep them as clean as possible. All right, so a little bit of grease goes a long way. Again, that theme, you know, you want to keep these lubed, and you want to make sure that they stay flexible and they provide you the maximum drag. So as you can see, I'm kind of buttering these up. Again, with a little effort, these are going to work in. If you wanted to, some folks, you know, they'll work it in with their fingers, and you'll get the good coverage that way. That's given that these have had none, this is going to work a lot better. And then you'll see why that you use the wider hole on the bottom. There's actually a ridge on this one that holds up. Okay, so that goes back on. It seats on top of that drive shaft and has an interlace into the spool bearing. Next up is the first of the metals, and again, oblong hole, oblong shaft, sits right in there. Next one, we're going to go and do the same thing. We're going to lube this with some dry grease. Nice even coat. This is a good time to tell you, if you don't do this, one of the recommended practices is to back your drags off if you're not using them. You know, when you're done fishing for the day, back that star drag off. Don't leave the pressure on them. And the reason for that is that if these things sit, this drag grease can dry, and if the drag grease dries, it becomes a bonding agent to the metal, and you lose your drags. So a little bit goes a long way, but if you back it off, you'll prolong the life of your drags. Okay, so that's the last of them that I've finished now. That goes on top. And then the drag nut assembly goes on top of that. And then the ferrule. Again, that tip that I offered earlier, it works here just as well. If you didn't know how this reel was set up, taking pictures along the way to remind you, you know, what you took off and the sequence you took them off is very, very valuable. So please go ahead and do that. There's no shame in reel repair. We would rather be right than be quick in terms of making that work. Okay, also, for example, if one of these springs had popped and you wondered where that spring went, the picture would show you that it belongs over that sleeve. So we've got this together. It's a simple case now of just lining up the side plate with the gear itself. Then we have access to the two holes where we took those screws from. And if you're using that parts bucket, it's real nice to find that small screw right where you put it. And those of you that watch me know that I have some trouble with small parts. So bear with me as we go get these 2 screws set in there. Okay, tightening the one down. Now some folks like to use battery-powered screwdrivers. I'm kind of okay with that in things like spinning wheels and that. Always a word of caution about watching the torque on those things and watching that you don't over-tighten. I would tell you, if you're working something delicate like this, don't use the battery-powered one. As much as I would like to think that there's an easier way for me to work small parts, I'm just not going to recommend that. So just bear with me. There we go. We got it threaded, and we'll be good. And then we'll move over to put that star drag back on. I noticed that as I put this together, 2 things happened. I got some of that grease on the outside, and also the anti-reverse gear popped up a little bit. That's fine. The grease, again, just take the paper towel and wipe that down. You're good there. Now those 2 drags, those 2 washers that went up, remember they're concave. These were going face to face so that you didn't have a gap there. Remember, you could swap these and put more tension on there by reversing it. But in this case, we remembered that it came out that way. It's going back in that way. And then the star drag goes on. There's a little bit of build-up in there. So again, I'll just use a Q-tip to clean that out. If it was a little varnished or something, I'd go ahead and use the WD-40 to break the shellac down. Okay, so we're good on that. Hand tighten. All right, and then we're going to just reassemble the reel. Line those up with the holes. Finger tighten the side. Finish that tightening with the screwdriver. Don't over tighten again, it is a metal side. Handle. Oops. Underneath the handle goes that little backup spring. Handle nut, handle cap. Oops, let's tighten that handle nut a little bit. Again, that's 7/16, you want to tighten that a little bit. And sometimes you have to work with it to make sure that that little screw is there. Okay, there you have it. So that's how you take apart a 967, an International 965. You do the basic maintenance across the board, and you reassemble. I hope that's been helpful to you. If you like this, please like the video. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to my channel, and you'll get what I'm working on a week-to-week basis. So thank you for watching. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.